Good morning.
Good morning, Bob.
It's good to be with you this Sunday morning, and once again, thank you for all the well wishes for my sister and also for my own well-being. I really deeply appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. All the great spiritual traditions have mystical branches. A lot of times when we talk about mysticism, we think about the Far East, Hinduism, Buddhism, some other types of spiritual traditions that are very different from our own. But in reality, mysticism also involves Islam, and it also involves Judaism and Christianity as well. There are actually mystical branches to those spiritual traditions as well that we actually can learn from. Mysticism, though, is not something that is new. It's something that has been around, really, for thousands of years. During our message this morning, we will examine modern mysticism in the 21st century. Further, we will look at how mysticism is and has become a significant part of many contemporary religious movements. You might say that mysticism has come out of the shadows and has really made a comeback as far as interest in the world today. Finally, we'll examine how modern mysticism is part of our own spiritual journey. Mysticism has a rich history. It started a long time before the modern New Thought movement. And a lot of times when we think of New Thought, we sort of combine the idea of mysticism with it. But it goes back much further than that, as you will see in our message. Mysticism contains universal truths that are an integral part of the major spiritual traditions of our day. Practices identified with mysticism are now a part of the spiritual lives of many. This includes such practices as prayer, meditation, and various healing modems, just to name a few. Lastly, as a New Thought community, we will see how mysticism is an essential part of our own spiritual beliefs, practice, and life. So let's first take a look at modern mysticism. And we're going to talk a little bit about the origins of modern mysticism and how it has come to the forefront in recent years. It can be said that the interest in mysticism had a reawakening at the beginning of the 20th century. This renewed interest has focused on mystics of the past. Two prominent Catholic mystics were the 12th century St. Francis of Assisi and the 16th century St. Teresa of Avila. Mysticism has a connection to psychology. And one of the great things that we learn when we talk about mysticism is that it's connected to other things as well too, such as psychology. And a lot of times today we hear talk about spiritual psychology as something that some psychologists also specialize in. In a book written by Richard Buck, the concept of cosmic consciousness was introduced. And he introduced this in a book by the same name, Cosmic Consciousness. And this book worked from the premise that humans have immortal souls and that the universe is set up in a way that constantly works for our good. A lot of times when we go through challenging experiences in life, we sometimes question ourselves about whether things should be this way. But in reality, everything we experience ultimately works out for our good. And we will talk about this as we develop this theme. Another key component of mysticism is that love is the force that moves our universe forward. Cosmic consciousness is an intuitive, non-intellectual awareness. And it's interesting because some of us have an interest in reading. There's a few of us here in this room that have some intellectual roots in different areas of study, but yet cosmic consciousness does not. A lot of it is based on intuition. In this consciousness, there is an inability to hurt others. There is freedom from sin, guilt, and fear. And there's also freedom from the fear of death. These are important things. These are part of what has become known as cosmic consciousness. It often results in peak experiences, transformation, and illumination. And as you will see in a moment, there is definitely a connection between cosmic consciousness and mysticism. On the other hand, mysticism is a philosophy that cuts across all cultures, and it is the height of religion. Someone would say it is the greatest religious or spiritual experience that one can have. Mysticism is an attempt to go beyond the heart, mind, soul, and self. In many ways, it's unexplainable as we talk about some of these elements in a few moments. It can be said that Lao Tzu, Buddha, and Jesus were both mystics and teachers. There's plenty of others I could name too. We'd probably be here the rest of the morning if you mentioned all of those that could be labeled as mystics and teachers. 19th century Indian Swami Vivekananda wrote, "Mystics in every religion speak the same tongue and teach the same truth." A lot of times in Unity and New Thought, we talk about our connection to one another and how there are universal truths that transcend any seeming differences that there may be with other religions or with other spiritual traditions. That is why it's so easy for us to welcome anybody from any religion or spiritual tradition to become part of our own spiritual community. Some key aspects of mysticism include an experience of God, a feeling that cannot be expressed in words, an experience that occurs outside of time, in other words, timelessness, a non-judgmental event, an experience of oneness, an existential state of awe, and many of us probably have experienced that on a dark, starry night in the summer, wonder, joy, and bliss, an event leading to enlightenment, and a state in which love, truth, and God are all that remain. These are all essential parts of what mysticism is about. This also contains elements of cosmic consciousness, and you probably recognize some of those elements as we have been talking. It is also consistent with Jesus' words at John 10:30. It's something we talk a lot about in Unity. And this is a Bible verse that's undoubtedly very familiar to you because I've used it many times from the platform. Jesus says here in John 10:30, "I and the Father are one." But it all comes down to brass tacks. We are all one. We're one with everyone else. We're one with the universe. And we're one with God. The second area we're going to talk about this morning is mysticism in contemporary religion. Trappist monk David Steindl-Rast has written, "Religions start from mysticism. There is no other way to start a religion." So in reality, there's roots of mysticism in all forms of spiritual traditions and in all religions. But unlike traditional contemporary religion, mysticism has no hierarchy, creeds, laws, or dogma. A lot of times when somebody visits a New Thought church, or our church here, sometimes people have a hard time getting a grasp because we don't kick you out if you disobey some law or rule of the church. We encourage you to think and explore on your own path. And that's something that's extremely important. There are no required ways of believing or worshiping. Mystics realize there are certain universal principles that lead to happiness. but these are principles, and it's something to keep in mind. Mystics focus on listening to their inner guidance. And it is as Isaiah 30, verse 21 states, and I'm going to share that with you. Because I'm sure many of us have experienced this. At Isaiah 30, verse, it reads, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" I'm sure many of us have felt some type of guidance to do something. It may be something major. It may even be something minor. But the important thing to keep in mind is that we ultimately are all going to get to where we need to get to. It's just that we are on our own different paths, and those paths will ultimately take us there. Mysticism transcends beliefs. Unlike traditional religion, mysticism has no creed or orthodoxy. It is, as author George Orwell said had one of his characters say in his book 1984. Many of us probably are familiar with that book. And this is what Orwell's character said. "Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness." So yes, if you are visiting us for the first time, we are a little unorthodox, but we embrace it. And that's something that's important. Mysticism is different from established religion in that being a mystic is free and open to anyone at any time. Our doors are open. You hear that in many of our opening statements and affirmations that we say in this church. Actually, each and every one of you in the audience this morning is a mystic already, and you just didn't know it. We do not need to be of a particular race, ethnicity, or economic class to be a mystic. When we think of mysticism, it is non-church, non-denominational, and non-hierarchy. It's that type of spirituality that we embrace and are a part of. A mystic may be a member of any religion. According to Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard, institutional religion often hampers individual awareness and the opportunity to experience the truth. We do not say that in order to be saved or to reach your highest peak spiritually, that you even have to come to church. We come here to this church to encourage one another along our own paths. And that's the beauty of a mystical philosophy. Truth cannot be imposed by a religious organization in order for them to force its members onto a particular path. Following the path of the mystic keeps us free from becoming trapped in the interpretations and judgments of others. And you can read many publications in New Thought and Unity, and sometimes you'll see ministers come up with different conclusions on a certain idea. And there's probably all kinds of ideas out here in the audience this morning. Instead, as a mystic, we are searching for the truth. All of us are on the path home to God. We never really left God, but the path we are on is remembering that we never left God in the first place. So you might as well say that as a human species, many of us at one time or another have suffered amnesia. And we are now coming back to remembering who we truly are. The last area we're going to consider this morning is mysticism as a part of our own personal spiritual journey. The mystical journey, as I just mentioned, is about returning home. Some believe this journey ends in heaven. Our spiritual journey actually ends when we awaken and realize we always have been home. And I think that's what's so unique. It's almost like being in a dream state. That's sort of what the experience of mysticism actually teaches us. Oftentimes, this awakening occurs in stages. The Bible actually has some verses that sort of indicate that. I'm going to share a Bible verse from Genesis chapter 28 and verse 12. And some of you will remember this as being part of the story of Jacob's ladder. So when we look at that, we just need to keep in mind that those ladders on the rung in Genesis 28 verse 12 are actually our own moving up the ladder of consciousness as well too. Because in his dream, he saw a ladder leading up to heaven. All of us are also on that ladder, at different rungs of that ladder, as we reach higher consciousness. Of course, we talked about earlier about cosmic consciousness. This is all a part of that. Spiritual development occurs in stages. Oftentimes, we may only become aware of our spiritual journey after we have experienced the life-changing event. And many of us have experienced that. We may have gone through a period of unemployment. We may have experienced a health challenge. We may have experienced a transition of a loved one. All of these events may have led us to an awakening in our own life. All of us have a story. Our story occurs within the context of our wholeness despite the circumstances of our life. In many ways, we are on the hero's journey of overcoming and growth that everyone's life is about. Because ultimately we are all growing. We are all moving forward on our path. Each individual's spiritual path is unique. As Joseph Campbell, the writer that made the hero's journey a well-known concept, writes, "The adventure of the hero is the adventure of being alive." We are all experiencing the adventure of being alive. While mysticism is a journey, it is not necessarily a quick process. It is something that occurs over time. As author John Mundy, the author of A Course in Mysticism and Miracles, states, it is like the blossoming of a flower. The flower takes time. Sometimes we've heard of people that are very impatient. How many of you are gardeners? So if you dig up the flower and keep looking at it to see if it's growing quicker, is it going to grow any quicker? No. So that's something that we need to keep in mind about ourselves as well, too. We cannot rush the process. It's something that will come in its own due time. Our journey is a process of inner realization. The journey can often be 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We probably have seen that occur many times in many different events in our own life. The path we are on separates the true from the false in our lives. This is not a journey that we take alone. And that's something that's good to remember. Spirit and God guides us along the path. There will also be those that resist our spiritual growth as well too. Mystics from the past have experienced this. For example, the Pharaoh was in the path of Moses when he was leading the Israelites to the Promised Land. And the Pharisees attempted to block the path of Jesus. I'm sure we can think of events and people that have attempted to discourage us from the path that we have chosen for ourselves as well. The mystic on the spiritual journey is seeking to fulfill their destiny. At times, our journey will take us through a dark night of the soul. Mysticism is an inner journey of transformation. Our journey is to live an ordinary life in an extraordinary way. And when I read somebody that made that comment, that really touched me. Because many of us probably don't consider ourselves prominent in the community, but we are still living our life in an extraordinary way. That's what mysticism is about. Our message, which is the first of 3 talks on mysticism, has given an overview of mysticism and the mystic's life. If you want more is coming, because this is the first of a 3-part series. In 2 weeks, we will examine how mysticism affects our views on mortality, synchronicity, and paradox. Namaste. Putting yourself in a posture that makes you feel comfortable and receptive. I am transformed when I live for my highest self. At the core of my being is a powerful, abiding essence. I focus my thoughts on the love, life, light, peace, and joy of God. I align with the essence of God. God is not separate from me, and I am not separate from God. I recognize the strength and power of my being. When I claim the truth of my divine nature, my life is transformed. I create my life according to my beliefs. If I believe that others should determine how I live my life, I may feel powerless. If I take responsibility for making my own choices, I feel empowered. I see and claim my infinite potential. Transformation is gradual but dramatic as I fully realize that I am eternally one with God. I make choices that help me grow as a spiritual being. Spiritual growth is an ongoing process and a very personal one. I open myself to insights every day, and my lessons come in many ways. From the moment I wake to the time I go to sleep, I have opportunities to learn and to grow. An important part of my spiritual development is learning to make wise choices. I can choose to have a positive attitude or a negative one. I can choose to make healthy or unhealthy decisions for my mind and body. I can choose to enhance my relationships, treating others in kind and respectful ways. Spiritual lessons are always available. I embrace them and rise to a higher level of understanding each day. Now we will enter into 2 moments of silence as we reflect on our own spiritual growth and transformation. Amen.